The sun was a cruel, blazing monster in the sky, and the air was thick with heat and silence. There was no escape from the relentless desert that surrounded Carson City, Nevada territory. It was October 26, 1861, and the place was a living nightmare. I had just arrived, and the first thing that hit me was the dust. It was everywhere on the streets, in the air, even in my lungs. The town was a jumble of wooden buildings, most of them no more than shacks, with the occasional saloon or store standing out like oases in a sea of desolation. The streets were filled with men, most of them rough and battered, their faces etched with the lines of hard living. They were miners, gamblers, and drifters, all looking for a way to strike it rich or at least survive another day. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, and the sun beat down with a relentless fury. There was no shade, no relief. The only green I saw was the scraggly sagebrush that clung to life in the barren soil. It was a plant that seemed to mock everything else that tried to grow here. The few trees that dared to exist were twisted and gnarled, their leaves a dusty green, as if they had given up on the idea of beauty long ago. I found a place to stay, a small, rickety hotel that looked like it could collapse at any moment. The room was a single, dimly lit space with a bed that sagged in the middle, and a window that barely opened. The air inside was thick with the smell of sweat and cheap tobacco. I sat down on the bed and tried to catch my breath, but the heat was suffocating. The town was alive with the sound of hammers and picks, the constant clatter of men working the mines. The hills around Carson City were filled with tunnels and shafts, all dug in the hope of finding gold or silver. But for every man who struck it rich, there were 100 who ended up broken, their dreams shattered in the unforgiving desert. I stepped outside and walked down the main street, trying to get a feel for the place. The saloons were already doing brisk business, even though it was only mid-afternoon. Men in tattered clothes and filthy boots stood around, drinking and talking in low, hoarse voices. I saw a few women, but they were rare and mostly kept to themselves. The only other people I noticed were a few Indians, their faces stoic, watching the chaos with a sense of resignation. As I wandered, I saw the evidence of the town's wealth and its poverty side by side. On one street, a fancy new hotel was being built, its wooden frame gleaming in the sun. On the next, a group of men were huddled around a pile of scraps, trying to salvage something useful from the wreckage of a failed mine. It was a town of extremes, where fortunes could be made and lost in a single day. I stopped at a general store, hoping to find some food or at least a drink of water. The store was a small, crowded place, with shelves lined with canned goods, tools, and other supplies. The owner was a grizzled old man, with a thick beard and a weathered face. He looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, as if he was trying to decide whether I was a threat or a potential customer. "Welcome to Carson City," he said, his voice rough from years of shouting over the noise of the saloons. "What can I get you?" I asked for some water, and he handed me a tin cup, filled from a jug behind the counter. The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was better than nothing. As I drank, I looked around the store, taking in the faces of the other customers. They were all men, most of them looking as worn out as the town itself. New in town, the store owner asked. I nodded. "Just got here today." He grunted and went back to his work, sorting through a pile of supplies. I finished my water and left, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. Carson City was a place of opportunity, but it was also a place of danger. I had a lot to learn, and I knew that my time here would be a test of my strength and my resolve. As I walked back to my hotel, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. The heat of the day was starting to fade, but the night promised to be just as harsh. I knew that in this place, survival was the only goal, and I was just one more soul trying to make it through another day in the desert. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the city. Billy had just finished his breakfast and decided to take a walk in the Luxembourg Gardens. It was a beautiful day, one of those rare, crisp, and clear days that made Paris feel like a fairy tale. As he strolled through the gardens, he noticed the old man he had seen before, the one who sailed toy boats on the pond. The old man was already there, hobbling along with his walking stick, his eyes fixed on the small boat gliding across the water. Billy watched as the old man's face lit up with joy, despite the obvious effort it took for him to move. People around the pond were friendly, stopping to help the old man when his boat drifted too far away. Some of them were having little boat races, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter and cheers. Even the big, burly men with mustaches looked like they were having the time of their life, as if they had forgotten all their grown-up worries. Billy couldn't help but smile. In America, he thought, an old man doing something like this would be laughed at, maybe even pitied. But here in Paris, it was a beautiful, normal part of life. The old man was respected, and his hobby was seen as something charming and delightful. As he continued his walk, Billy noticed how different everything felt. The French people treated their children with a kind of respect that he had never seen before. Even young children were as polite and well-mannered as adults. On the streetcars, the conductors thanked the passengers, and in the stores, every interaction felt like a small, polite dance. Billy remembered a recent trip to the store, where buying something as simple as toothpaste turned into a little ceremony. The clerk and the customer exchanged so many pleasantries and thanks that it felt almost like a performance. It was a stark contrast to the hurried, often rude interactions he was used to back home. The more he explored, the more he realized that there was a different way of living here. People took their time, they enjoyed the small moments, and they treated each other with kindness. It was a world away from the fast-paced, often harsh life in America. Later that day, Billy decided to visit the famous Notre Dame Cathedral. The building was truly grand, with its intricate carvings and statues. There were cardinals with elaborate hats, knights with long swords, and angels and gargoyles staring down with a mix of humor and solemnity. The cathedral was a work of art, a testament to the creativity and faith of the people who had built it. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the city, Billy found himself reflecting on his time in Paris. He was growing more and more fond of this place, with its dust, its heat, and its cold nights. He even liked the fact that it never rained, seeing it as a sign of a place where nature and people lived in a different, more harmonious way. He thought about writing home to his friends, telling them how much he loved it here. He would tell them about the old man and his boats, the friendly people, and the beautiful, respectful way of life. He would tell them that, despite all the differences, he had never liked any country so much before. And as he walked back to his lodgings, he felt a sense of belonging, a feeling that this strange, wonderful place might just become a second home. The silence was growing heavier, and Thomas More's anxiety was mounting. He had been at Donington Park for over 3 weeks, and the only letter he had received was a short one from home. He understood that his father was busy with business, but he couldn't fathom why his sister Catherine wasn't writing more often. Catherine, with all her free time, should have been using it to keep in touch with him. The more days passed without a letter, the more Moore worried that something might be wrong at home. Moore's thoughts were often filled with the day-to-day life of his family in Ireland. He missed the simple things like the sound of his mother's voice, the stories his father would tell after a long day's work, and the mischievous antics of his sister. Every morning he would check the post, hoping to find a letter from them, but the post box remained empty. This silence was making him feel isolated and anxious. Moore decided to write to his mother, expressing his concerns. He wanted to know if everyone was happy and healthy. He asked his mother to make Catherine write more often. Even the smallest details of their daily life would bring him comfort and joy. He longed to hear about the weather, what they had for dinner, or any little adventure they might have had. As he penned the letter, Moore's mind wandered back to his childhood. He remembered the times they would gather around the fireplace in the evenings, sharing stories and laughter. Those memories were a balm to his soul, but they also made him realize how much he missed his family. He hoped that by writing, he could bridge the distance and feel a little closer to them. The letter to his mother was filled with love and longing. He expressed his gratitude for her support and asked her to reassure him that all was well. He also wrote about his life at Donington Park, hoping to share a bit of his world with her. He described the people he met, the places he visited, and the things he was learning. He wanted his family to know that he was doing well, even though he was far away. After finishing the letter, Moore sealed it and sent it off, hoping it would bring some comfort to his mother and sister. He knew that the wait for a response would be difficult, but he was determined to stay patient. He continued to check the postbox every day, each time hoping that today would be the day he would hear from them. The days passed, and the silence continued, but Moore's resolve did not waver. He kept busy with his work and his friends, but his thoughts always drifted back to his family. He knew that eventually he would hear from them, and that thought kept him going. He wrote more letters, sharing more stories and asking more questions, and each time he sent one, he felt a little closer to home. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a letter arrived. It was from his mother, and it was filled with news and love. She reassured him that all was well at home, and that Catherine was now writing to him more often. Moore's heart soared with relief and happiness. He read the letter over and over, savoring every word. The silence was broken, and he felt a deep sense of connection to his family once again. The letters from these artists and writers offer a glimpse into their personal lives, and the profound impact their loved ones had on them. Each letter is a window into a different world, a different time, and a different heart. Keith Kollwitz, a German artist known for her powerful depictions of human suffering, lost her youngest son, Peter, in World War I. In a letter to her other son, Hans, she explains how work has become her solace and her duty. She writes, "My dear Hans, why does work help me in these times? It is not just that it relaxes me. It is a task I cannot shirk. Just as you and your siblings have been my tasks, so too are my other works. I must nurture the seed placed in me, and I cannot stop until I have made my talent bear fruit. Peter was seed for the planting which must not be ground, but I am not seed for planting. My task is to nurture, and you, Hans, must believe in life." Vanessa Bell, an English artist and a member of the Bloomsbury Group, lost her eldest son, Julian, in the Spanish Civil War. In a letter to her sister, Virginia Woolf, she expresses her inability to focus on serious work. "I don't think I can paint portraits at present. It needs a special kind of effort which I don't think I'm capable of. I'm only working on small things that matter only to me. Adrian is coming next weekend, and Angus someday next week, so no more solitude." Jean Cocteau, a French poet and playwright, had a complex relationship with his mother. In a letter to her, he defends his lifestyle and choices against her criticisms. "Ma chérie, your letter has come, and it's the same as always. You see me through the eyes of the cheap press. The bar where we meet is charming, and I play Stravinsky's drum for relaxation. Radigue is staying because I admire him. I've been busy with my writing and performances. I spend my life disengaging myself from my instincts, keeping them under observation, and taming them for my advantage. If someone tells you I'm in a Negro jazz band, just say, 'We think it's the best job he's ever had.'" A. Housman, an English scholar and poet, shares a whimsical story with his mother about a child's ambition to be God. "My dear Mama, I was delighted to get your long letter. The violets were very sweet. A friend's son wants to be God when he goes to heaven, but he's now more interested in being the devil because the devil has horns and a tail. I remain your loving son." Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, rarely wrote letters, but this telegram to his parents shows his devotion and generosity. "Hi babies, here's the money to pay the bills. Don't tell no one how much I sent. I will send more next week. There is a card in the mail. Love, Elvis." Marcel Proust's mother, Jean, often wrote tender and loving letters to her son. "My darling, your letters are all charming, but above all, no more of that looking like a Frankish king your hair gets in my eyes when I think of you. I hope by the time I finish this you'll have had it done." Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, a French artist known for his posters and paintings of Parisian life, wrote a playful letter to his aunt's dog, congratulating her on the birth of her puppies. "As your nice letter announced, maternity's joys are yours once again. I implore you not to eat Melanie, the housekeeper, and to lick your babies very thoroughly. In closing, I send you my heartfelt congratulations." Nikos Kazantzakis, a Greek writer, filled his letters with laughter and love. "Darling mother, Anastasia and Eleni, I have no greater joy than to get a letter from you. The other day, I shouted with joy when I got your letter, and my friend said, 'What's come over you?' I got a letter from home, I shouted, from my mother and sisters." Leo Tolstoy, the famous Russian author, had a deep affection for his aunt, Tatiana Alexandrovna Yergolskaya, who raised him after his parents died. In a letter from the Caucasus, he writes, "Dear Aunt, I am stationed here with the army, but I think of you often. You encouraged me to write novels long before I started, and I will continue to write and send you my work. Your support means everything to me." These letters reveal the deep bonds between these artists and their loved ones, showing how personal relationships shaped their lives and their art. The room was warm, filled with the soft glow of candlelight. The window was open, and a gentle breeze played with the curtains, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from the garden. It was a peaceful night, one that promised sweet dreams and gentle thoughts. Lev Nikolaevich Tolstoy sat at his desk, pen in hand, the paper before him blank except for a few scattered words. His mind wandered to the beautiful dream he had been nurturing, a dream of a future where everything was as it should be. He thought of Yasnaya, the place he called home, and how it would look years from now. He saw himself neither young nor old, free from the worries that often weighed him down. Next to him, his aunt, the person he loved more than anyone, would be there too, her presence a comfort and a joy. They would live the life they had always known, but their roles would shift. Lev would work in the mornings, but they would spend most of the day together. They would have dinner, and in the evenings he would read to her, choosing stories that didn't bore her. They would talk, and he would share his memories of the Caucasus, while she would tell him about their parents and the people they both loved who were no longer there. They would cry together, but the tears would be sweet, a shared remembrance of the past, but the dream didn't stop there. Lev imagined himself married to a woman who was as kind and loving as his aunt. She would be his partner, and they would have children who would call his aunt Grandmama. The house would be the same as it was in his father's time, with his aunt living upstairs in the same room that her mother once occupied. They would start a new life, but with a twist. Lev would take on the role of his father, though he worried he could never live up to it. His wife would be like his mother, and their children would be their own. But there would be no one to replace his aunt, for no one could fill the gap left by a soul as beautiful and affectionate as hers. 3 new figures would enter their lives from time to time: his brothers, especially Nikolay, an old bachelor, bald and retired from service, but as noble as ever. Lev imagined how Nikolay would entertain the children with his own invented fairy tales, how the children would kiss his hands, and how his wife would go to great lengths to make Nikolay's favorite meals. Lev and Nikolay would share memories of times long past, and his aunt would sit in her usual place, listening with pleasure, calling them Lyavachka and Nikolenka, as she always had, scolding Lev for eating with his fingers and Nikolay for not having clean hands. Tolstoy's hand trembled slightly as he wrote, the words flowing from his heart. If he were given the chance to be Emperor of Russia, or if a fairy offered him anything he desired, he knew without a doubt that his only wish would be for this dream to come true. He wondered if his aunt would be happy, and he hoped that the tears he shed were tears of happiness, for he was happy to be able to love her so deeply. Even if every misfortune were to befall him, he would never call himself completely unhappy as long as she existed. He put down his pen, the letter unfinished, and wiped away the tears that had formed in his eyes. He knew he would write more, but for now he was content. In a few days he would see Nikolay again, and he would write to his aunt then, sharing more of his thoughts and dreams. Outside, the night was still, and the breeze continued to play with the curtains. The scent of the flowers filled the air, and Lev felt a sense of peace, knowing that no matter what the future held, the love he had for his aunt would always be with him. Jamie wrote to his mother with excitement about the progress on his famous peacock room. He described the room as a noble work, and something they could be proud of. Despite the long hours of work, he felt content and gratified by the praise from important visitors, including Princess Louise and the Marquis of Westminster. Jamie was tired but happy, and he reassured his mother that he was well and looked forward to continuing his work. Paul Cézanne, the famous painter, also wrote to his mother, sharing his thoughts on his art and the weather. He mentioned that his friend Pissarro, who had a good opinion of him, was in Brittany. Paul felt strong and confident in his abilities, determined to strive for perfection for its own sake. He admitted that it was a tough time for selling art, but he remained optimistic. Paul cared deeply for his mother, often taking her for drives and telling her stories, despite his own sensitivity to being touched. T.S. Eliot, the renowned poet, wrote to his mother about his new promotion at the bank and his work as an assistant editor for The Egoist. He shared his excitement about learning new languages and the interesting people he met in London. Eliot described his colleagues, Miss Weaver and Mrs. Aldington, and marveled at the hidden gems of the city, like the beautiful old square near King's Cross Station. He assured his mother of his love and devotion. Ernest Hemingway, the celebrated author, wrote to his mother with a firm warning. He had learned that a journalist from McCall's magazine wanted to write an article about his childhood. Hemingway, who contributed to his mother's support, threatened to withdraw his financial help if the article was published without his consent. The memory of being dressed as a girl by his mother in childhood was a sensitive topic for him. George Sand, the famous French novelist, wrote to her son Maurice, who was the mayor of Nohant. She playfully teased him about receiving her official government circulars, which she had drafted. Sand was involved in politics and found the work exhilarating, even if it sometimes felt surreal. She reminded Maurice to read out the bulletins of the Republic to his National Guard, showing her playful and authoritative side. Tennessee Williams, the acclaimed playwright, wrote to his mother about his new comedy, which he was preparing to direct at the Coconut Grove Playhouse. He hoped she would fly down for Christmas and the opening night. Williams shared details about the cast, including Barbara Baxley and Cliff Robertson, and expressed his excitement. He also mentioned Miss Brenda, his dog, who had survived another heatstroke in Key West, thanks to her quick thinking. Isaac Babel, the Russian writer, wrote to his mother about sending her money and the progress of his book, articles, and materials. He mentioned that Zhenya had arranged an appointment at the ministry for her French visas. Babel often used coded messages when discussing financial matters, making his letters intriguing and sometimes mysterious. Through these letters, we see the deep connections and complex relationships between these famous artists and their mothers. Each letter reveals a piece of their lives, their struggles, and their love for their mothers, despite the challenges they faced. The rain in Paris was relentless, drizzling through the fine sieve of the sky. Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, the famous artist, was feeling the heat of the city and the pressure of his work. He had just finished a book with Clement, So on the Jews, a project that had kept him busy and brought him recognition. But now he was tired and needed a break. He wrote to his mother, his dear mama, asking for a little financial help. "Terrible heat which hit us all of a sudden," he began. "I'm winding everything up, and am going to face the move, or rather moves." He explained that his friend Joyant had bought the Goupil Gallery, and he was finishing up some work there. His publisher owed him 1,200 francs, and he was hoping his mother could advance him 500 francs more. "If you can't, I'll make other arrangements," he added, not wanting to burden her too much. Henry was sweating like a bull in the heat, but he was determined to keep working. He mentioned that he was thinking of painting a portrait of a friend, Paul Leclerc, and he would visit his mother at Malrome first. "This way you'll have the pleasure of my company," he wrote, hoping to brighten her day. Meanwhile, in Rome, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was enjoying his journey through Italy. He had traveled secretly through Bavaria, the Tyrol, and several Italian cities, finally arriving in Rome. He was overjoyed to see the places he had only known from prints and stories. "I can't tell you how happy it makes me to find so many of my life's dreams and wishes unraveled," he wrote to his mother. He was keeping a low profile, but he was eager to return home through Switzerland and spend time with her. In Spain, William Randolph Hearst was on his honeymoon with Millicent. They had witnessed a total eclipse, a stunning and almost otherworldly experience. "The total eclipse was over. I was sorry. I had dropped out of the skies back on Earth again," he wrote to his mother Phoebe. The beauty and mystery of the eclipse had left a profound impression on him, and he was grateful to have shared it with his new wife. In Peking, St. John Perse was finding solace in his horseback rides. His horse, Alan, had become his close companion, and they spent many hours together. "My chest is still expanding at my age," he wrote to his mother, amazed by the physical and moral benefits of their rides. Alan, once skittish around foreigners, now trusted him completely. They spent time together in the house, even though Alan still had a bit of a wild side. A. Houseman, the poet, was exploring Italy and writing to his mother about his travels. He described the town of Castelfranco, where he was staying, and the old buildings he had seen. The cathedral in Pisa, he noted, was quite a failure, high-shouldered and almost mean-looking outside, but it had a certain charm inside. The baptistery and the leaning tower were more impressive, especially by moonlight. He compared the Arno River to the Eixe at Exeter, finding the Arno less muddy but still picturesque. Henry James, the novelist, was enjoying a weekend at Mentmore, the grand residence of Lady Rosebery. He wrote to his mother about the opulence and luxury of the place, filled with precious objects and art. "This is a pleasant Sunday," he began, "and I have been spending it in a very pleasant place." He described the vast, gorgeous hall where they had afternoon tea, with golden thrones and a colonnade like in Paul Veronese's paintings. Despite the grandeur, he was happy to return to London and his personal work, feeling inspired by the contrast. Finally, T.S. Eliot was on holiday in Périgueux, a small old town in the south of France. He was enchanted by the southern shrubs, the warm smells of garlic, and the donkeys and ox carts. There is a particular excitement about arriving at an exciting place after a sleepless night of travel, he wrote to his wife, Vivian. The musty smell of the hotel, the good French food, and the garden outside all contributed to his sense of contentment. He was so absorbed by the beauty around him that his letter ended abruptly, as he stepped into the garden to soak it all in. These letters, written by different artists and writers, capture their personal experiences and emotions, painting a vivid picture of their lives and the places they visited. Each letter is a small window into their world, a moment frozen in time. As the letters unfolded, they painted a vivid tapestry of the deep bonds and varied relationships between these renowned figures and their mothers. Each letter, a small window into the hearts and minds of men who shaped the world through their art, thoughts, and deeds. St. John Perse reminisced about the jovial chaos of organizing a grand celebration in Peking, where his love for theater and camaraderie shone through. His words captured the joy and the gentle humor of a man who, despite his lofty status, found pleasure in the simple, shared moments of life. Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec's letter, filled with requests for truffles and goose liver, revealed a man who, despite his bohemian lifestyle, held a deep affection for his mother and the comforts of home. His playful tone and attention to detail spoke of a man who, though often surrounded by the excesses of Parisian life, never forgot the simple joys that grounded him. William Makepeace Thackeray's letter was a heartfelt acknowledgment of the bittersweet nature of love and separation. His words, filled with both humor and a profound sense of loss, showed a man who, despite his success, remained deeply connected to his mother and the memories of their shared past. William Randolph Hearst's letter, with its jaunty and amusing descriptions of his wedding, revealed a man who, despite his vast wealth and influence, could still find joy and humor in the simple moments of life. His gratitude for his mother's gift and his pride in his new wife's reaction showed a side of Hearst that was both tender and deeply human. T.S. Eliot's letter, with its introspective and reflective tone, spoke of a man who, despite his poetic genius, was haunted by feelings of guilt and self-doubt. His description of the peaceful farm in the Surrey Hills and the rain that delighted him offered a glimpse into a more vulnerable and personal side of the poet. Elizabeth Goethe's letters to her son, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, revealed a woman of wit and wisdom, who, despite the fame of her son, remained grounded and humble. Her love for the theater and her pride in Goethe's achievements showed a mother who, though often in the shadow of her son's greatness, never lost her own spirit. In the quiet moments of their lives, these men, each a giant in their own right, found solace and strength in the love and support of their mothers. Their letters, written in different times and places, united by the common thread of maternal love, remind us that even the most extraordinary lives are built on the foundation of simple, everyday connections. As the years passed, these letters became more than just words on paper. They became a testament to the enduring power of love and the unbreakable bonds that tie us to those who raised us. In the end, it is these moments of tenderness and affection that define us, no matter how far we may travel or how high we may rise.